deserve opportunity. We should care about our children living in poverty because adults have made choices as a society that creates conditions where childhood poverty exists at the scale that it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, equity, equal opportunities, undernutrition, education, empathy, opportunity. Children are our future, regardless of circumstances they are born into. And lastly, it is our job to remove barriers to students' educational success. Many of those barriers are directly tied to poverty.
And that one is, that really resonated with me because toward the end of today's conversation, we are going to look at 5 top best practices that educators and supporters of educators, that if we keep those practices in the forefront, we can help to remove or reduce some of those barriers. So as we go through our conversation today, I would like for you to concentrate on one of these guiding essential questions that you're going to keep in your mind as we have engaged in more conversation. But there's one that we're all going to really discuss, and it's this one. Are you able to suspend judgment and understand people are making the best decisions possible from their perspective? And the reason I want us to really focus on that one, in addition to one that you're going to choose for yourself, many individuals make judgments about people, students and their families who are surviving in poverty. And usually those judgments are not positive. I've heard things such as, in my 40 years of being in the field of education, oh, Greta, they just don't care. They're just lazy. They didn't try to do better. They just want to live off the system. And we know that that is not true for the majority of individuals who are surviving in poverty. If they could do better, they would. There may be a small percentage of individuals where some of those negative perspectives may be true, but for the majority, it isn't. So this is really difficult. When you work with a lot of educators, such as what I have done in my career, I hear this continuously, especially the word lazy, and they don't care about their children's education. So I want you to really focus on one of these that you can reflect on during this conversation and either after the conversation as we move forward. All of our research today is coming from Ruby Payne's work. She is well known in the field of poverty, and Dr. Eric Jensen's work. Both of these individuals are very well known. They're not the only, but these are the two that I have selected for today's conversation. So why is there poverty? I want you to take a few minutes and reflect. Where did poverty come from, and why do we have poverty in the United States of America, the greatest country in the world? Why is there poverty? And I do want to open it up verbally for someone to give your opinion. Doesn't have to be a research. Why do we have poverty? Where did poverty come from? How did this cycle start? What caused it? What triggered it? So as we move on and you're thinking, because I see all your smart faces thinking, and I'm sure someone would be, hey, Alex, I didn't see you early. Nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you. I'm happy to jump in here if you want someone to answer.
Oh, okay, absolutely. You know it.
Okay. Well, I think this is a tough question to begin with because we've not yet loosened up or gotten really to the heart of the work. So I'm just going to get serious really quickly. I think that why poverty is because we're a country that has been built on slave labor, which is exploitative. And in many ways, those systems continue to exist to this day in less visible ways. And that has led to the oppression of certain peoples. And that's why there's such inequity economically in terms of which communities experience poverty disproportionately. So I think that the reason poverty exists at the scale it does in this country is because of policy choices that have explicitly been made by elected officials.
Alex, let me just say this, A+ for you. And you hear, I see heads nodding, people shaking their head. You hit the nail on the button. It's the system. We need to shift the system. And how do we do that? Because unfortunately, somewhere way back, long before all of our time, and unfortunately, we do have to look at the bad times in our country. A system was set up where certain groups of individuals became oppressed, by oppressors, and it just got out of control. I don't believe that they really meant for it to, but it got out of control, and it is a system that we need to shift, because who gets to decide whether you live in poverty or not? Who makes that determination what a salary or what a monthly income is, and who decides if that's poverty or not? Who decides what the minimum wage should be? All of those are system choices. So Alex, I can't say anything else to that. And you really are getting us right there. So thank you for taking us right to the forefront, because this is what the research is saying. That the cycle of poverty is this is what happens when individuals fall into that cycle of poverty. Usually the family or generations of families are in poverty. Then the child grows up in poverty. Usually students of poverty who are surviving in poverty might not get the best education because their zip code may not allow them to be in the area where the best educational opportunities are there. Individuals are struggling to get a job. And then the cycle just continues, and it goes back to the system, the structure, not the individuals in the cycle. It's the structure that has allowed this to occur. So as we move on, here's what most Americans are taught about poverty. And let me give you a few minutes to skim through this. And if you see something that resonates with you, please feel free to include it in the Zoom chat. And this statement goes to what Alex just shared with us. If you get an opportunity, there's a book titled The History of Poverty in the United States of America. And it gives you a great reader-friendly historical perspective. Now, I want to focus on this last paragraph, because this is especially crucial for us as educators. Many information or perspectives about poverty will promote and increase the stereotypes that individuals already have about certain groups of individuals. And usually when those policies and programs and procedures are put in place for individuals, students and families who are surviving in poverty, it's usually created by individuals who don't understand it fully. Because you're not really bringing to the forefront those individuals who are targets or victims of the poverty cycle, to help to let them share their voice. Here's what we need. Here's what we need to get out or to shift from the poverty level. So usually, instead of those policies and procedures really assisting, sometimes it will boomerang and cause the opposite. For example, in the field of education, and this is nationwide, we're quick to say if this school has a high free and reduced lunch, meaning most of the students they don't have to pay for their lunch. They get it free, or they pay a minimum amount. We'll throw lots of money at the school. But what good is money if you have not worked with the individuals to know how to work with the students and the family? We're just throwing money in. And then when we go back to see if there's been a return on investment, typically we don't usually see it because we just threw pots of money, but we haven't really worked with the individuals or the structures or the procedures to shift what we're trying to shift. So I'll stop to see if anyone has any rebuttals, comments, or concerns about the statement that I made. Money, you can't just throw money, because then it becomes a procedure of charity. If you really don't put the money and couple it with how we're going to really train adults who are working with these students and families to really give them the best educational opportunity. So many individuals, not those of us on this call, our assumptions about poverty is this: oh, Greta comes from a poor family. There's no way she's going to be able to really be successful in life. I'm going to try to do the best I can. And don't let my family be a family where there's a single parent there. Then you couple that, oh, she comes from a single family, two parents are not there. There's no way she's going to be able to fulfill her highest potential. So this is why conversations are like this are so important. If you hear individuals with that perception, we need to really stop that, because having that assumption or perception about students and families, you're not going to really work with them to give them your best. You're just going to throw resources, but just throwing resources at individuals isn't really the way to shift from a poverty perspective. So this is Eric Jensen's definition of poverty. And there are three key words that really are true. Poverty is a chronic condition. It will affect your mind, body, and soul, and it leads to risk factors. And we're going to talk quickly about what some of those risk factors are. I love his definition. It's practical. It is a chronic condition. The majority of individuals in poverty want to get out of that. They want to live like the rest of us. It will affect your mind, body, and soul. Body, don't have enough eat. Your mind, you're full of stress, anxiety, constantly worrying, where especially if you're moving from place to place. That's why there's a lot of budget suites, especially in Las Vegas, because you can move from place to place, weekly rent, and you can just move, especially if you can't keep the rent going. And it will cause risk factors. I love Jensen's definition. And here's what he means by the risk factors. There's something in the world of education known as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And as you skim through this, I want to share with you that when we get to the ACEs information, this doesn't mean that if you're in a middle class socioeconomic status or high, that you aren't impacted by ACEs either. But those who are surviving in poverty, their risk factors to be impacted by ACEs, if we go by Eric Jensen's definition, is going to be higher than those who are not surviving in poverty. And here's what the risk factors are. And I really love this because Alex touched on it. It's an adverse social and economic. We can't leave the social out, because many of your children that you work with, many of them know that they are different from the other students. They know that when they hear other children talking about where they went over the summer, the trips they took, or where they go shopping, they know that they can't have that same conversation because their situations are totally different. Where they're shopping, even how they get their clothes. You have some children, their clothes are hand-me-down all through their life. They're either getting it from relatives, someone is donated, maybe there's a clothes closet at their school. So they know that there's a risk, a socioeconomic social factor associated with as well. So the research states that if a child is surviving or living in poverty, their chances of being impacted by one or more of these risk factors are higher than any child who's living in a middle class or high socioeconomic level. Now, I want to say this. This doesn't mean that if you're in a middle class setting or a high income that you can't be impacted by poverty, because you can. Because most folks who are in high economic, they're impacted by emotional neglect, especially if they got two parents, high-powered job, the parents are always gone, busy executive. So, but the research will validate that those who are surviving in poverty, this will impact you more. And there's actually an assessment that a trained therapist can give you to determine if you're going to be impacted by ACEs or not. And based on that assessment, if you score at a certain range, and it indicates that you will be impacted by 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these, research is saying that this is likely what your adulthood would be as you grow older. If you have 4 or more of these situations in your home or in your life, research indicates this is probably what's going to happen throughout your life unless you meet a lucky, fortunate individual like those of us who will help you navigate and go a different way in your life. I was very concerned about the ACEs when we really were in the shutdown during COVID-19, and it was this one. We already knew that physical abuse was traumatic for some of our students. And we already knew that witnessing domestic violence was already traumatic for some of our students. So during the COVID-19 shutdown climate, I'm just wondering what happened with children, especially those who are surviving in poverty, who were living in homes like this. They weren't at school to really report it. Because when you're at school, you can easily report it, or if an adult sees evidence of one of these, there's procedures that they have to follow. So this is what Eric Jensen means when he indicates the risk factors are higher. And please, I'm going to say it again, this is not limited. Those in other socioeconomics can be impacted by ACEs as well. But if you're living, surviving in poverty, the risk is higher than any other. So here's the 3 types of ACEs. It's usually abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And the household dysfunction is there if you're really living in a home where poverty is very high, is because the adults in the house, they have other things on their mind. They're trying to figure out how to keep the bills going, where the food is going to come from, maybe where the next paycheck, etc. So this is why it's important. Educators and teachers, and we're all educators and teachers, the better the school environment, the less the child's early risk factors. I do believe that. Now, I want to stop and see if anyone disagree with that. School, we are crucial. We're more important. And Laura, I think you have your hand up. Go for it, Laura.
I just have a question. Do you know why ACEs specifically calls out violence against the mother and not just interpersonal violence in the household?
Yes, and Laura, great question. Let me tell you what Metro and the Office of Civil Rights things, and they get they come up with these ACEs based on reports that's submitted, usually from school, juvenile delinquent, educational agencies, welfare agencies, all of those agencies that support individuals, and the homeless agencies. Based on the reports that they're getting, this is what they see the most. This is what they see the most. Not saying that it doesn't happen, that it can't flip. And Laura, that's a great question. But I know in some doctor's office, when you go, especially for us as females, there may be a question on their questionnaire. Are you living in domestic violence, or are you in an abuse relationship? And if you answer yes, they'll ask, can you get out of there? And if you answer no, I can't, that's reported somewhere. So based on what's reported from all of those agencies that provide support, that's why this one is there, Laura. Very good question. Good question. Any other thoughts or comments? So it is crucial that we have a level of awareness, because the more success a child has at school, the more positive they see, and even their family.
Greta,
I hear somebody. Is that you, Jennifer?
It is. Alex put something very important in the chat that I thought I'd make mention. Domestic violence is same-sex couples go significantly underreported despite data that shows it's likely similar rates in same-sex couples.
And Alex, we know why. Most individuals are not going to report it. If you're same-sex couples, they're dealing with the society's perspective, and people just don't report it. So that goes back to what Laura's question. If you don't report it, we don't have it. But we know that there's some cases out there. I know there is. So thanks, Alice, because that is definitely the truth with same-sex couples. They're not going to report that. Absolutely not. And let me put another layer. If you are a family surviving in poverty and you're undocumented, you definitely aren't going to report it, because you feel like that's going to open up another can of worms. So therefore, the help that the child and the family need may not necessarily be there. This is why it's crucial that we have that level of awareness of the paradigm that some of our students and families are living in. So I asked the question earlier, who gets to decide whether you live in poverty or not? And I want to preface this with some sensitivity, because normally when I do this with educators who are district employees, I always get a heartfelt no. Greta, you're talking about me. Based on the federal guidelines, I'm of poverty. This comes from the federal government, and this is the 2020 federal government guideline to determine who's living in poverty or not. And it's very readable. If you are one person in the household, and if this is your gross annual income, or this is your monthly income, and if this is your hourly wage, the federal government says that you are a person living in poverty. And this is a 2.2% increase from 2019. I'm curious to see what the 2021 is going to look like, and that's coming out in August. And then it goes on and on. If you're a family of 8, and if this is your gross income, and this is your monthly income, or if this is your hourly wage, the federal government says that you are a person of living in poverty. So who makes that determination? See, it goes back to what Alice and Laura said earlier. It's the system. How come we can't shift this? Because most people who are living in poverty based on the federal guidelines, they don't even know that they're living in poverty, because many people that live in poverty aren't living sad and a depressed life. There are many people who are living in poverty, and because they have that support, they don't even realize it, but the federal government has designated this is the poverty rate. So I wanted you to know where that came from, and we have to go by those guidelines. So this is what it looks like in our own state, and this is the 2019 stat, because the U.S. Census Bureau wasn't able to release to me in time the 2020 stat. So let's look at it. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. No, I made it smaller. You might have to adjust it on your screen, but I want you to look at the ledger here. What the ledger is indicating, anything that's in dark blue, that means 31% of the population is surviving in poverty. So you see a lot of dark blue right here in Clark. This is kind of the lower end of Vegas, and it takes in a little bit of Laughlin and Boulder City. Anything that's in this color blue, that means 19% of the state is living in poverty. So we see that color blue, right? Look at our state. And then anything in the green, that means 0 to 10.7% of the population. So that's right there in the central part of our state. And then you got a little bit over here in the western part. But the majority of our state in 2019, before COVID struck, we were considered a poverty-stricken state, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And remember, they get their data based on what people report when they complete the census report. Questions, comments? So for those of you who are in Clark, in the Las Vegas area, huge here. So let me show it to you another way. But I want to ask this question. Do you think COVID-19 had an impact, will have an impact on this, that when the 2021 stats come out from the U.S. Census Bureau, do you think our state's going to be a lot darker blue? Or what do you think is going to happen to us?
Definitely darker blue, because I mean, we've lost a lot of industry. We definitely in Clark have lost, I mean, people lost their jobs with the casino industry. A lot of people, you know, are living paycheck to paycheck or with no paycheck at all. Restaurant industry is really down. So I think it'll definitely be darker.
Absolutely. And was that Ian Bowers? Give me your first name. Is that
Nicole?
Nicole, want to make sure. Nicole, thank you. Absolutely. So when we really go back face to face, if it's total face to face, when the beginning of next school year, we might see some anxiety levels or some type of attitudes that we didn't see before, because this is going to have an impact on what's happening in the child's family. So let's look at our unemployment rate. This is the national rate, comparing it to Nevada's rate. And this is data all the way up to August of 2020. So you look at the red, and that's the national rate. And it's from October 2019, and then we were right here, COVID climate. So here was the national rate. I mean, this is the Nevada rate, I'm sorry, the red. We're so much higher, almost 30% higher than the national rate. And we all know the reason why. The majority of our state, we depend on gaming, agriculture, etc. And if businesses shut down or they decrease their hours, this has something to do with the unemployment. So that's going to have a significant impact. And this isn't because people are lazy and they don't care. This didn't occur because of that. So I'm going to skip all of this because we've already talked about COVID and the impact of students and families living in poverty. So let's go to what the zip code. This data is from the United States zipcodes.org, which is a part of the Office of Civil Rights. According to that data, and this data was gathered in January of 2021, these are the zip codes with the lowest poverty rates in the state of Nevada. So this is all throughout the state. They have the lowest poverty rate according to that data, January 2021. So this takes care of the central part, the northern part, the southern part, the western part, the eastern part of the state. But here are the zip codes with the highest poverty rates according to the United States zip code data from January 2021. And we was have, unfortunately, the majority of the area with the highest poverty rate is this 89427. That's kind of in the central of the state. Then we have McDermott, Nevada. I think it's East Central, North Las Vegas, and then Las Vegas. Then there's Reno. So these are all of our zip codes with the highest poverty rate in the state of Nevada. So let me stop here before we move on to see if there's any other questions or comment. Just gave you the quick little background data. And so I think here's one question, going back to something. If we want to shift this, let's shift the system to make that minimum wage higher and shift what the federal poverty guidelines are that comes out from the federal government. That's one way, because they make the decision whether you're living in poverty or not. We don't get to make that decision. And Jennifer, I saw you unmuted. Didn't know if you had a question or comment. Okay, very good. So our next researcher is Dr. Ruby Payne. If you have not had the opportunity to be exposed to some of her work, and I want to shift through Ruby Payne, then we'll take a quick break and then end up with the last half of our poverty conversation. This is a great book, A Framework for Understanding Poverty. She's housed out of Houston, Texas, but her research has been around. She's been doing this work for over 20 years. A former educator, now she's a researcher and also a consultant working with districts regarding students and families surviving in poverty. So Ruby Payne says to us in her research that there are 7 types of poverty. You got the working class poverty, because many people are working, get a paycheck every day, trying to do the best they can, but based on the federal government's guideline, as Nicole said to us earlier, they're living from paycheck to paycheck, and that is certainly not because they don't care. The system is saying that they're living in poverty, and they're trying their best to do. It's hard for them to save. Most of the time, they don't have health care because they're in jobs that don't provide it, or they can't afford it. They can't afford the health care. And you know, that's why many people don't retire, because when you retire and you want to keep that same health care that your organization provides, unless you're an organization that will still give it to you 100% at a lower cost, most people won't retire because the health insurance is so expensive to keep that good health care. Then we have the immigrant poverty. This is according to Ruby Payne's research. And the reason I wanted to bring these two, because this is significant and relevant to our state. Many of our students and families fall into these two categories. They fall into this category. And the main reason those who are immigrants, they face the language and the cultural barriers, and they don't know how to navigate or work themselves around to shift out of the poverty situation. But the two types of poverty that really impact the state of Nevada, particularly in Las Vegas and Reno, is the generational poverty and situational poverty. Now I want to stop for a moment, give you a few minutes to skim through generational and share with me, why do you think generational poverty impacts our state the most pertaining to our students and their families? What is it about this generational poverty that impacts our students the most in the state of Nevada?
So I think there are a couple of factors. One is, and it's been a while since I've seen more recent data, but just the education levels in general. So if you come from a family that doesn't have, certainly not a college degree or an associate's degree, but a lot of families may or may not have been able to continue on with high school because they themselves have to work to keep their family afloat. So if you don't have that vested in there in the family or generational culture of we got to work to kind of keep our head above water. Also, I think our level of minimum wage and also the, you know, most of the job market is on some level lower wage as well.
Nicole, you are right on, and I see people shaking their heads, and if you are right on spot. And I want to go back to something you said. Generation is 10 years, 10 to 20 years. So if you grew up in your family heritage, no one ever owned anything. They always lived in an apartment. chances are you might develop the mindset that's not reachable for me to own a home or own a condo or own a townhouse because no one else in my family has done it. They've always rented. Or what you said, Nicole, the educational, the research is there. It's still valid, Nicole. The more education you have, and it doesn't have to be a college degree, but anything post-secondary after high school, the better wages you make. But people, we don't make that decision. That's all coming from the government. The more highly educated you are, well, most individuals can't afford it, especially now with college tuition and even going to a community college, and the high family illiteracy. That's what I wanted to focus on. Literacy is the key. If you're growing up in a home and your academic vocabulary hitting 5,000 words or more the first day you hit school, already you're not at an instructional level to be on grade level. So that literacy there, and all you hear or see throughout your life is, I'm just making it one day at a time. You don't have those 5-year goals and plans like most individuals who are coming from a different socioeconomic status. This is your house. This is what you know, and you've seen it from generation. This is all you know. This is why people like us, we're important. We can show the child and the family there is another way. There is some hope. But if you grow up in this and this is all you see, you're like, it's no hope for me. I can't get out of this. So any other comments or concerns regarding the generational poverty? And the situational is self-explanatory. We know the situational. And many individuals who are two couples married and they get a divorce, even if they do get alimony or child support, sometimes that income will shift to a lower rate, and that will cause the situational. And many of our students and families will probably be in situational poverty when we all get back face to face in August because of COVID-19, unemployment, etc. So I'm going to skip all of this because we got the generational and the situation, and we already know COVID-19 may have an impact. But here's something that I wanted to share with you before we get into our Zoom breakout room. This is all Ruby Payne's work. And I want you to think about a child or a family that you work with and you know that they're surviving in poverty, or you perceive them to be in poverty. We value what we know. Typically, and I know there's always exceptions in any point of research, typically those who are really from a poverty income, this is what's important to them. It's all about the relationship. They're trying to survive, and they entertain themselves, or entertainment is a way to get their mind off of their depressed situation of living or surviving in poverty. Those individuals who are in the middle class, this is what typically their values are. I want to work so I can achieve things, and I want to have security, a nice home, nice car, etc., be able to travel, do all those things. If you're from an upper income, typically this is what your value systems are. And it's all about the social connection, and they're really heavily into the politics. Not saying that these individuals aren't, but generic. This is really what the value systems are. And I want us to focus on this relationship from those students and families who are truly surviving and living in a lower class, lower socioeconomic. And Jennifer, I see that you've unmuted.
Yep, Greta, in the chat, Nicole Bowers from ELCO said, I think in ELCO we have a really specific problem with situational poverty because we are a mining community. And
Thank you. Yes, Nicole, absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of that. That is definitely going to be an impact. Thank you.
And then also Alex had put in there, would love to hear more about what you mean by that. So maybe Nicole, if you want to maybe unmute yourself.
Yeah, because Nicole, for those of us who don't understand that mining and all of that in the upper part of the state, that's a good question. So do you mind, Nicole, explaining?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we kind of live in this bubble up here in Northern Nevada. We have a really high cost of living up here because of the mines. Mining is an industry that people that work in the mines do make quite a bit of money. It pushes them into that upper middle class category. And so people coming in that aren't working in the mines don't have a chance to kind of gain your footing here, you're working those middle class jobs, and because of the cost of living is so high here, it can really push them into that poverty category.
Yep. And Nicole, that's why, and I know this has always been a conversation in the southern part of the state. Clark County School District, located in Las Vegas, is the largest school district in the state, where Washoe is the second. But your per pupil expenditure, because of the mining, typically is a lot higher than the per pupil expenditure that we get in Clark, even though we have the majority of students. So thank you, Nicole. That is so right on. I love it, love it. Anything else, Jennifer, before I move on?
Yep, and Greta, Lexi from Elko as well put in the chat, if you don't work at a mine, you feel left behind by those who have that salary.
Exactly. And here again, who determines who's making that type of money? The people don't determine that, it's the system. So, and you can tell when you drive around, you can pretty much tell who's working in a mine and who isn't based on what you see there, homes, etc. So that would make students feel some kind of way as well. So looking at the hidden rules again from Ruby Paynes a little bit more in detail, I want us to take a look at education. Typically, people will make the assumption, oh, Greta is from a poor family, they don't care about education. Not true. If I'm in poverty, I value education, but it's so abstract to me and my family, because we haven't really seen anyone in our family where education has made has benefited. And let me use this as an example, and I want to be culturally sensitive how I say it. Many athletes who are in my racial ethnic identity, who are African American or Black, and if they come from a place of poverty and they become athletes, that money isn't just theirs. The rest of their family who had not had an opportunity to get themselves or shift out of poverty, they're there to make that American dream become true for the rest of their family. And this is why typically many of our athletes who identify as being African American Black kind of sort of get themselves in a little bit of trouble, because if you haven't been taught of how to manage those big contracts and all of that money, because you've never seen anyone in your family do it, and there's no one there to really coach you. So it's hard when you move from one level to another if you don't have a mentor or someone to coach you. So education is value, but it's so abstract because you haven't seen enough success in your own family situation. And then we hear a lot of this. Those who are really truly surviving in poverty, this is true to them. Love and acceptance, relationships is so important, because they have to know that you really care and you really like them in order for that trust to be developed. That's just their registry. This is how they survive. This is their schema. So it isn't that they don't care. They hadn't had enough successes to think like a middle class individual would when it comes to some of these attributes, or like someone who lives in wealth. So we have to really stop that myth that if I'm living in poverty, I don't value education. Going back to what Ruby, survival is important to me. It's not that I don't value it, but I'm thinking about survival. I'm trying to maintain good relationship, and then I'm using entertainment as a way to get my mind off of my current situation of surviving or living in poverty. So if individuals come from this and they're really impacted by this schema, they bring that to school with them. Children and adults who are truly surviving. And the reason I'm saying adults, because educators are quick to remind me, especially our professional support staff, Dr. PA, I'm living in poverty based on those guidelines. They bring those rules with them. So this is why you will see so many of our students who truly are surviving in poverty, when they get to school, the first thing they want to do if somebody makes them angry, they want to fight or say some unkind words, because that's probably what they're seeing at home. They don't understand the hidden rules of school, that's not the way you handle or you address that situation, because we bring our family and our home values to school with us, and sometimes that is a clash. So Jennifer, I see that you've unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah, we have in the chat, Alex had put regarding the schema that you just had presented. Seems like the thing all share that they all share is that love is conditional regardless of wealth. Reminder of the importance of a caring adult relationship.
See, and Alex, thank you. All three, according to Ruby Payne's research, regardless of what socioeconomic, this is there. It's there. And it's especially true for those who are living in low socioeconomic. So thank you. It is across, that's the common, consistent theme. Now, I want to look at the worldview for a minute. If you're surviving in poverty, you look in the world at the world in terms of what's happening with you locally. You're not really caring about national stuff and international. You're looking at what's happening in the now, what's in the be right now, what's going on now, because you're constantly trying to think of how am I going to survive, especially if you have children involved, to make it better for them. So what are some of the hidden rules of school that might interfere? And I just want you to think about that as we listen to this quick YouTube clip where Ruby Payne is talking to a group of individuals at a Goodwill event. And she's training them on trying to understand, because, you know, Goodwill is one of the supporters and distributors, especially for individuals who may be living in low income housing, and for those individuals who truly are surviving in poverty based on the federal guidelines. Goodwill is a good place for individuals to go. And Ruby is trying to get them to understand the rules, the value systems, how they really think and what's important to them. Listen to what she had to say as she describes a situation, something that a group of church people did for a mother surviving in poverty, and they were shocked at the way the mother reacted because they thought they were doing something great for the mother. So listen, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
I was at a church in Waco, and they told me this story. They said, we have this young lady who's been coming to our church and on Wednesday morning for Bible study from the community college. They were very impressed with the young lady. So all the ladies at the church finally got together because they noticed she was riding on the bus and they thought she should have a vehicle. So they got together, pulled their money, spent $25 on a used vehicle. The next Wednesday, when she came to Bible study, she was riding the bus. And they said to her, what happened to your vehicle? And she said, well, my boyfriend had never had a motorcycle, so we sold the vehicle to buy the motorcycle. They were furious. And I said to them, if I had been the young lady, I would have done exactly the same thing. And they said, you can't be serious. And I said, yes, I am. I said, first of all, the young lady understood two things. Number one, she didn't have the resources for the vehicle. And number two, there were a set of hidden rules she was following you didn't know. Take a minute and talk with your neighbor at the table. What resources does a vehicle take? Take a minute and talk with your neighbor. To have a vehicle, what kind of resources do you have to have?
And you all know what kind of resources: gas, insurance, maintenance, oil change.
Right.
Okay.
Vehicles are a lot like children, you know, you have to feed them, you have to insure them, you have to shoe them, you know, they take a lot of resources. So I said, she understood that. And number two, she understood a set of hidden rules you didn't know. And one of the hidden rules in generational poverty is that you have to share your money, your vehicles, and she knew that would create an even bigger problem for her. So she gave you the reasoning that she thought you would understand. She did it for a relationship.
I want to stop to see if you have any questions or comments about that. Why did Ruby feel that that was important to share with those individuals who work at Goodwill? Because all of those people there were Goodwill employees. See, a lot of times we think giving money and resources is the way to assist individuals surviving in poverty. But if I'm giving you a car and I don't have the means to keep it up, what good is that going to be for me if I don't have the means to keep up the maintenance?
Greta?
I think I see you, Tammy. I'm not sure, Tammy.
Yeah. Hi, Greta. Nice to have you with us today. I think it goes a little bit back to the savior complex, right? Like people rush to they want to save somebody, they want to give them a car, it makes them feel better, and they're doing it with all the right reason that they think, but they're not really sitting down, to your point, and having a conversation and really finding out what the true source is and what would really benefit that particular person.
Tammy, and your comment is right on with what Hannah had to say, what we said earlier. Usually when those policies and procedures, especially in the educational setting, are established, there is individuals who don't truly understand what it's like or understand the value system. We're putting the procedures and policies in place instead of bringing the people that is really going to impact. So thank you so much. Let's take a look at this one. Student rides to school late, missed breakfast. The teacher sends him to the office because he probably said something or didn't do something or talked back, or maybe he had his head down on the desk. Educator didn't think, could it be that he's hungry? And you have a lot of educators, not the ones you work with, that would dispel this. Oh, Greta, I don't believe that. He just didn't want to listen. See, that's that understanding. Breakfast is crucial for some of our students because that's the only time they're getting it when they're at school Monday through Friday. That's why many school districts did the food delivery and the lunch delivery during the COVID-19 because they knew. Jennifer, I see that you've unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah, I see that Trisha was trying to say something. Trisha wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trisha. I didn't see you. Hey, girl, you know I didn't mean to ignore you.
No, that's fine. It was
Okay.
back on the other one when she said, if you get something in that condition, then you have to share. And not only to me is the object of keeping the car, but if you're the only person in your family of however many that has the vehicle, all of a sudden that takes your time because then you have to take this person to the store, this person to school, and
Yes.
there's a part of that would be, I would think, kind of like, I'm not prepared for that. I get to go to my church meeting on Wednesday and that's what I want to do. And I get on the bus and I do that because that's that entertainment that takes my mind off of all of these other things that I would have to do.
Absolutely.
That was an interesting statement.
Trisha, so right on, because you supported the statement that I made earlier. Typically, not all, in athletes who identify in my racial and ethnic group, when they get those huge contracts, it's not just for them. They know they have to share. Somebody is looking for you to buy me a house, a home, a car, all the above. And if I don't forget, I will tell you the story about Kobe Bryant and his parents. His parents live here in Las Vegas in a little community here in Summerlin. And it's a nice house. It's not the kind of house that you would think that maybe Kobe Bryant would purchase for his family, for his parents. And they were upset because they wanted something huge and larger. And Kobe went on record. This was public because he and his parents, I hope he's resting in peace, they had a little falling out about it. They thought he should have done more. And he said, Mom, Dad, I'm buying you something that you can maintain and keep up yourself so you won't keep calling me to do it. You see, so the church, that goes right back to what you said. So that's why the lady said, and until we understand that if you have a middle class setting or upper, you don't understand that. What you see, oh, wow, the church bought you a car. But because of the value system and the schema, that's going to be more problematic. And then can I really maintain or keep it up? Jennifer, I see you.
Yes, Nicole put in the chat. This was back when you put up the slide about the school. She says, what is it meant by rules of school? School as an institution or rules of school through the eyes of the students?
School as an institution. There are hidden rules in the school. So let's talk about that for a moment. What are the hidden rules in the school that maybe some of our students don't understand, especially if they're coming from a low socioeconomic status? What's the rules of school? You're supposed to come to school, do what the teacher tells you to do. If you get angry, you don't fight. It's certain words you don't use at school. You come prepared, have all your supplies and materials. You come to school, you should have a certain dress codes. You should have your hair a certain way. And really, before Title IX and all the federal government jumped in, there was a time we did not feed children breakfast because the hidden rule of school was, the institution is, that's the parents' responsibility. You should have that child prepared to learn when they get to school. It's not my responsibility to feed your child breakfast. What are you talking about? So that's what we mean, the institution. And if you don't understand those rules or don't have anyone, because you're not seeing that at home, when you get to school, you're getting yourself, because there's a clash between home value and school value. So great question. But I'd like to flip it if we have time toward the end and look at it through the eyes of a child as well. So we're getting ready to get into breakout rooms. I hope we can do that, Jennifer. But before we do, I want to give you an opportunity. If you have a QR scanner on your phone, you can scan this. Or if you don't have a QR scanner, use your camera. Make sure that the square, the block captures the code, and it's going to give you 2 case studies. You'll have it on your own device. If you don't want to access it that way, in a few minutes, I'm going to put in the Zoom chat the poverty case studies. I did it at the beginning of the session, but I'll include it into the Zoom chat again, if you can't retrieve it this way, so that you have it on your own personal device. And if you are getting it on your own personal device, you should have something that says case study 1, and then something that's titled case study 2. So I'm going to stop my share screen and actually put the link for those 2 case studies in the Zoom chat, just in case you weren't able to get it on your own device by scanning the code. So this is coming to everyone now, because Jennifer, I don't think I emailed these 2 case studies to you. I know I didn't. I forgot to do it. So let me make sure that at least 4 of us have the case studies, because when we get into Zoom breakout rooms, I see that there are 32. Jennifer, it would be good if we could have 6 breakout rooms where there's about 5 of us. And when you get in the breakout room, what I would like for you to do is to discuss those case studies. Let me bring them back up. And when you discuss the case studies, I do want you to answer the question that's at the bottom of each case study. When you look at case study 1, you see what happened at the school. Then in your Zoom breakout rooms, discuss the question. And you're going to decide which case study you want to discuss, because due to limited time, we only have time for 1. So in your small group, you decide if you want to discuss case study 1 or case study 2. And your guiding question is at the bottom of each case study. And you only need to do 1. You don't have to discuss 2. Are there any questions, comments, clarifications about the case studies when you get into the Zoom breakout?
And Greta, Terry made you host. Are you able to do that?
Oh, let me see. Okay, thank you. That'll make it easier. Yes, I can. So I am going to create 6 breakout rooms, and you should get the invite shortly, asking you to join breakout room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You join it, and let's give ourselves about 5 minutes to have a discussion, and you only need to discuss 1 of those case studies, but you make the decision which one you would like to discuss. Questions, comments, concerns? And I would like to suggest, but you all are so smart, I love CIS, but to keep the conversation going, maybe choose a facilitator in your Zoom breakout room. And that facilitator can be someone whose birthday is closest to today. So to keep the conversation going, choose a facilitator, and that facilitator should be selected based on whose birthday is closest to May 11th. All right, you should get your invite, and I'll send a broadcast saying breakout rooms will close in a minute or so before we actually close them out.
Hi.
Oh, I was on mute. Can you hear me? No. Hi. Hello.
Sarah's on mute.
Hi.
I was saying hi to everybody for about 3 minutes.
No worries.
Okay. my questions went away. Anybody have a birthday really close?
Peggy.
My
Peggy.
birthday. My birthday by the end of this month.
Well, I think I have you beat, Peggy. I said, wow, great week to have a birthday. I get to be.
Oh, that's right. It is your birthday this week, Sarah. Oh.
Your birthday too, Sarah, in the May?
My birthday's on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Sarah.
Well, thank you.
This Thursday.
Yep,
Not
the
in
13th.
January. Okay. Happy early birthday, Sarah.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you. Are we gonna talk about case 1 or case 2?
I don't know. What do you guys want to? Case 1 or case 2?
Well, you're the facilitator, Sarah. You have to pick one.
Well, I think both are really kind of interesting to what we do. So I guess let's go with case 1 first, which is the teacher who bought the movie tickets for her entire class.
For Christmas.
For Christmas.
Yeah.
And how her understanding of poverty may have affected that choice.
I do think we run into that a lot down here because like if we're going to give incentives out, we don't try to like give incentives to like our lower poverty school on the other side of town to make sure that kids can actually get there, you know, and utilize their gifts. So I always think that's something that sticks in my head. Like if you're going to give children the movie passes, are they actually going to be able to get to the movies to enjoy it?
Which we've given out movie passes before. That's why I think it's all interesting in like what we do. We've given out movie passes before.
Well, and do the families have money to go with the children?
Mhm.
Or, you know, am I just going to be able to go into the movie, but I can't get popcorn because I don't have that? So it's like,
Or if it's a child, like a younger child, what about the parent that has to go with them? Would they be able to afford that? You know, I mean, we don't give them younger, but like middle school and up, they could probably go to the movies by themselves. But
and then the parents might feel the pressure of like, well, I need to buy groceries, but you got that as a reward and I really want to follow through. So we'll go to the movies, but we won't spend as much maybe on a necessity.
Yeah, and then if you know, if English is a second language, like is there, you know, a movie that's applicable for them? So yeah, like, do they get the experience of going to the movies? Is it something they can access?
Mhm.
Or like now, if it's a pandemic and there are no movie theaters, again, they can't utilize it in any way. So there's just left to.
Mhm. I guess a question I would have is what would be a good incentive that you could use instead of those things?
Cash.
That's hard to give cash.
Yes.
I don't think we could do that in the site budget there, Cal. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's like give them
cash we
give
can
them all-
provide, give out gift card. It's easy for them to spend.
Yeah,
Hmm.
give them the amount of money that you would put for a movie pass. So if you're gonna splurge and do movies, just give them cash. And don't say it's for Christmas, say it's just for the season of December.
Mhm.
So that.
Or like a gift that's like instant, like that is like the sweet treat bag or something like that everyone can enjoy like together as a classroom. Sometimes that almost seems easier because then you're taking out a lot of the variables.
We have to be careful when we do that too, because a lot of those things do not meet these schools' nutritional guidelines, so we can't give a
No,
lot of
they
those things
don't,
out
Sarah.
either. So we got to be careful on that end too.
And everybody gets a bouncy ball. Yeah.
Are we incentivizing with sweets? Like, is that just building them up to like have, eating issues? Who knows? Good.
Do we give incentives anymore? I mean, kind of a tough.
It makes it tough. It makes it really tough.
But you could say that earning a wage is an incentive. So we are capitalists. We have to still hold that somewhere in there.
I mean, I would be excited if my teacher ever gave me money for a Christmas present.
Oh, yeah.
That would have definitely incentivized me a little bit. That's for sure.
I had one teacher that gave out peanuts when we learned like our times tables. Like she would give a handful of peanuts if you could reach a level of your multiplication table.
And I think that is like a good point about our economic stuff as well, because some kids have chosen to stay always virtual because they've taken a full-time job or they have to babysit their siblings.
Absolutely. And do you know, there were some schools that I was working with here in Clarksville, when the students did come to the virtual session, they would have their little siblings with them, and the teachers actually wanted to write them up for that. I'm like, come on, educators, we are visitors in their homes now. If there isn't an adult there, what you want them to do with their little brothers and sisters? At least they logged on. I'm so happy they logged on. Mm-hmm. They could have easily said, nobody's here to really force me to do it. I'm just going to play with my little brother and sister, but at least they logged on. So thank you. So we do have time. We're doing great on time, Jennifer, and I think I'll be able to get to microaggression. This is what I want us to do. Let's talk a little bit about the case study. And then when one group shares what case study they discussed and how they addressed the question. If another group had that same case study and you have something different to add, a different perspective, we'll give you time to add something only if it's different. Then after this, we'll take a stretch break and then go into looking at strategies, things that you can do as educators and supporters to really assist students and their families, and also remind those educators that you're working with to move to that perspective. That's what it's so crucial. I'm going to say this, and Jennifer, let Brandon know I said it. I do a lot of work with Matt Kelly Elementary School, and Brandon, one of your CIS staff, oh, I love it when I do the professional learning with them. Brandon is always there. He has the shift, the mindset. He's collaborating, reminding the educators. I just love it. So your role is crucial. Also, if you see someone shifting, you know how to have that courageous, respectful conversation or model to them, because that's why you are with the organization that you're with, because you already know all this stuff and you believe it. I'm just confirming and validating what you already do. So who had case study one? Who decided to address case study one? Where the elementary teacher, she does a spurge every Christmas and buy lots of gifts for her movie passes for her students. Who would like to address number one?
My group did.
Okay, is that Ariana? Am I saying that right? Okay.
Yes, you are. So we did choose the case one study. We really talked about the different ideas she could have done. One of the reasons why we decided against it is because, even if she's sending them each student home with a ticket for themselves, they never thought about parents. They never thought about gas, transportation, how they're going to get there. What if mom's working? Who's going to be able to take them? What if she doesn't want to let just one kid go all alone? What if she can't afford for the rest of the kids to go? Not to mention snacks, or there's a lot of other reasons. We also decided, came up with some of ideas that what she could have done. Maybe send the kids home with a bag of candy to share with, their brothers and sisters, if that were the case. So it was really nice.
Thank you so much, Ariana's group. Anyone had that same case study and you had a different perspective or a different thought on case study one regarding the movie passes? Anyone want to share something different that your group thought of? Well, I would thank Ariana. I like what your group said, and let me think about something. Usually the intent is good. We all have good intention, but if the impact doesn't remain on that flow of I meant well, because now if the student doesn't have the opportunity to go, then the student is crushed. So there could have been other ways, as your group discussed, the teacher could have really just asked the parents, if I give these movie passes, will there be a way? Or the teacher could have said, instead of buying the movie passes, work with the school and set it up as a field trip, some other kind of way, because intent is good. But if the impact doesn't stay on that flow, I'm doing something really good. And this case study is really a real case study that really did happen in a school setting. One of the schools that Ruby Payne was doing case studies with, but it's relevant also to our state as well. So what group did case study 2?
Greta, before we go to case study 2, there was something very relevant in the chat by Kendall. This is actually a super relevant case study. I think CIS and schools have given out Wet and Wild and Cowabunga Bay tickets, something we can be more aware of in the future.
And it's a good intent. I love it, love it, love it. But we do have to consider, you know, where our students are, because there would be some students, let's say the majority of the students in a particular school or class get to go. And then they're coming back all happy talking about it. You know how children are, they're excited. Then you got a few that probably did not get to go because of the socioeconomic status, not because they were punished or disciplined. It's the socioeconomic status didn't allow them to go, because trust me, students are afraid to show up if they have to ride the city bus to get somewhere. They are ashamed for others to know that, or they may be ashamed of what their parents or their family's car look like or doesn't look like when they start comparing, because children pretty much know if they're living in poverty or not when they start comparing themselves to their classmates and their colleagues. Unless you're in a school similar to Matt Kelly, thank goodness, Jennifer, you have a CSI support there. Matt Kelly is the highest poverty school in the state of Nevada. That's public information. I'm not saying anything confidential. So most of those students, they all come from the same socioeconomic background. 98% of the students at that particular school, and it's only 300 to maybe 375 students, are on free lunch, not reduced lunch, free lunch. So thank you. Anyone tackle case study 2? Anyone would like to address what your group discussed regarding, or did anyone choose case study 2?
Our group kind of touched on both. I can share what we talked about for case study 2.
Alex, is that you, Alex? Am I saying that right? Okay, go. Okay.
All right, for case study 2, we talked about how there was a couple of us that when reading it at first, it was a little harder to identify why that was the best choice. But just about how sort of something you touched earlier, that if you're not being careful at the resources you're providing, it's almost like stepping in to save that single parent when like we don't even know if that's something that was necessary, and just like assuming that those were things that they wanted because there were things that we would want or the principal would want.
Oh, I like what your group said. Those things, that shopping trip was based on what we think the student or the child needed. Did anyone call the father? Because I see that the mother isn't in the home. We don't know what that is. And the father is ableism, disability. Did anyone call the father to say, I would like to take your daughter shopping? The principal referred, blah, 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 blah. What do you think will be? We can still put in some things that we think will be beneficial because the teacher is looking at it from an educational perspective, but also let's dump some things in there that perhaps the family or the father has indicated that the daughter may be in need of. Anyone else have any comments regarding that particular case study? Anyone else? Lexi, I think it's you. Go ahead.
We kind of brought up the assumption that maybe the principal made, like, since there isn't a mom in the picture, that someone needs to step in and take over that mom role, and take the girl shopping, since it's just a dad who would take her if they didn't. But altogether, we just went with the assumption that they needed the help, he wanted the help, and that, you know, there was no one else there to do it.
Absolutely. So again, good intention, but just kind of be prepared, because you know when you're doing things from the heart, why you're really doing it, but be prepared if the impact isn't what you think is going to be, especially when you're working with students and families who are truly surviving in poverty. So on that note, I would like for us to take a stretch break. If we do 5 minutes, is that justice? Oh, you know what? I see something in the chat. I got to pay attention to it real quick. This is something I've run into in my school around the holidays. Absolutely. See, I love that. However, when called to assist, if they don't need assistance, they do not. See, I get recommendations from the teachers and the admin to which students they think need help. See, this is relevant, and I know the intent is there, but we just need to really be a little more culturally sensitive and thoughtful. And now that we have the information about typically how individuals, what their norms are, because trust me, the students and the family would just love it if you just call them and say, hey, how you doing? I notice the holidays are coming up. Is there anything I can do for you? It's that relationship. And they may say no because of their pride, but baby, they're going to talk about you at the grocery store and everywhere. You know, Miss Greta called me. I can't believe she called me, to see how the family, because that relationship is important to them. And all of the time, we don't have to give people things to establish a relationship. So if we do a 5-minute stretch break, will that be just fair enough? Okay, perfect. 5 minutes. And when the music goes off, well, we'll know we should kind of be back where we need to be. Thank you.
Great job, Greta.
Oh, Jennifer, it's the group. This group, I love the group. This is my first time being with this group, isn't it?
Well, it's the same, it's just 2 groups together.
2 groups together. Okay. Well, when they come back, we can look at some best practices, and then I'll quickly get into the microaggression, just why they need to be aware and all of that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, it seems like we're all coming back together. Wonderful, wonderful. So I am going to bring up a QR code because I want to give you an opportunity to get something that we're going to use for our very last Zoom breakout before we end this part of the conversation. So let me bring this up and give you an opportunity to share it, get it on your own device. Because we will use this, and if you scan it, you're going to come up with a chart that lists 5 research-based tips to break the poverty barriers. It'll say strategies to break poverty barriers. So let me give you an opportunity to get that on your own device. And then I'll also put the link in the Zoom chat for you to also get it as well. And if you were able to get it through the scan, either a QR code or using your camera, you should have something that looks like this: strategies to break poverty barriers. Okay, I see some thumbs up. And then what I'm going to do is put the link in the Zoom chat for those of you who did not scan it on your own device, so that when we get to the Zoom or breakout rooms, after we look at how do we really break these barriers, because that was one of the questions that one of our guiding essential questions, you have some tips to use at your school setting. So I just put in the Zoom chat Google link for Zoom best practices, and it should give you that same guide on strategies to best practices or research-based practices to break poverty barriers. So I want to start here as we wind up this part of the conversation by showing you a quick YouTube clip of what children say about surviving in poverty, and then quickly go through 4 research-based practices, and then give you time to go into Zoom to look at those strategies that's on the document that you have, to choose the one that you really feel would be the most crucial or the most important that CIS should adapt or make it one of your guiding principles when you're working with students and families in poverty. So let's look at a quick YouTube clip so that we get an opportunity to hear what students are saying about living in poverty or surviving in poverty.
Sometimes we ask for something and my parents, they can only just afford to get it. Sometimes they can't even afford to buy us new clothes or new shoes, like these shoes. These used to belong to my grandma. my mum's not the best, and she's not poor, she's, in between. And there's not once I know how I haven't gone out without tea, lunch, or breakfast.
Greta?
And in our heart, she knows that.
Yes, Jennifer.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but it's really hard to hear.
Is it? Okay, let me see if I can adjust the volume. And I have my volume up as high. So how about the others? If it's difficult, I won't waste your time. Is anyone else having a hard time?
Yeah, they're saying they can barely understand. They can't hear it.
Okay, and it's probably because the way it was recorded, they probably weren't talking as loud. So we'll just skip that and we'll go right into this. It's really all about building relationships when we really want to work with students and parents to give them hope, because the more students and parents see another way of living, I know too many people who are successful and they really did grow up poor. But when they tell their story, they always talk about an educator, a teacher, or somebody who gave them hope, somebody who believed in them, somebody who showed them or exposed them to other ways of living. Because that's what it's really all about. There are too many individuals who are successful, who grew up in poverty, and they made it, but it's because they had an educator or something in the educational setting. Someone showed that sincere concern about them, and they established a relationship to show the individual there is another way of life. You're not doomed. It doesn't matter if it's generational poverty for you and your family. There is hope for you. And another thing that would help individuals is if we can show them that school is a productive and meaningful place for them to be on the start to make a better life for themselves. This is why this conversation is so important for educators. We have more power and influence than we realize when used correctly to show them that there is hope, and the more we can expose them to other things. So in your Zoom breakout rooms, what I would like for you to do is pull up that document that's titled Strategies, 5 Research-Based Practical Strategies. And what you're going to do, and let me bring it up to make sure that everybody has it, and those who had to get it from the Zoom chat, were you able to get it from the link? What you're going to do is in your Zoom breakout rooms, because we want to end with what's some action, what's something that can be done. There's 5 theories here, and the theories give you best practices, and they're all research-based. And what I would like for you to do is to discuss in your Zoom breakout room, which one of these theories do you really think CIS should embrace based on this body of research? Say if you decide to go with social capital theory, I'm just using that as an example. Look at the best practices and then be ready to share with us, why did your group choose this one? And which one of these best practices is something that's practical, that CIS can really be a source or a resource when working with schools to navigate students and their families to shift from poverty, to give them hope that their lives can be different. So you're going to look at these 5 research-based poverty barriers, and then choose only one that you feel CIS should really, really embrace as maybe one of your core values when it comes to working with students and families surviving in poverty. Look at the best practices and discuss which one is most practical, which is important, which one can we really embrace as an organization when you're providing that support to your various schools and your various school districts. So let me stop to see if there's any questions or clarifications regarding what you're going to do in your Zoom breakout room. And Jennifer, I see your hand up. Oh, okay. That was probably from telling me that the YouTube clip wasn't loud enough. So I'm going to put you in 6 breakout rooms again. You look at the theories, choose one. Look at the best practices and choose the one that you really think your organization should really embrace, particularly when we're working with students and families of poverty. So you should get an invite. Again, We're going to do the 6 breakout rooms again, and maybe about 2 or 3, maybe 4, 5, maybe 5 minutes or so, but I'll be dropping in to see how you're going to make a determination when the breakout room should close. So your invite should be coming now.
Hi,
Hi,
how are you?
good. How are you?
It's been so crazy, Terry, today. It's been back to backs. I apologize. I need to you're on my list to reply back to.
No worries, not a big deal. It's just, yeah.
So, okay, this is our baby room. Hi, Ari. Hello?
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Terry. Hi, Aria.
Hi, Peggy.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, Ari.
Oh.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Jennifer?
Good.
Sorry, my mute was off.
No, my gosh, you're totally fine. So we have to have, you all read the 5 different theories?
Yes.
So what, okay, maybe we can take a minute to just finish it up, read the rest. I mean, there's like 2, like maybe 3 that stick out where I'm like, ooh, I don't know. There's a lot that we can focus on. But I open it up to you ladies. What do you think, like, which is most important? Like, which one do you think CIS should embrace?
I think the asset theory is pretty good, only because it's internalizing not only like the students, but building that the adult relationship with the school and the climate.
So you think the asset theory, where the best practices are learn what assets your students and families have and what services or opportunities they need to move forward. Connect them to resources. Build partnerships in your community so you know where to find resources. Help people navigate the middle class world, such as paperwork, asking the right questions, and taking steps.
Only because I think that we're not only helping, the students, but we're also helping connect the family to different resources that are around our community.
Absolutely. Man, isn't it so crazy? Like, I feel like CIS does so many of these things, the best practices in all of these different, areas and these different theories. But yeah, I think yours is spot on. What do you think, Terry or Peggy? Do you
I think access theory is the best because some parents, the bare language we can translate and we can give some advice. Due to the student cannot communicate with the parents, like some certain, for example, they send a letter home, they don't understand, and we can advise and translate and connect with the parents if they don't understand the school certain thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ari, when we go back in, if she asks us, do you want to speak on what we thought would be best for CIS to focus on?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Wonderful. I think you hit it spot on, Ari, with the asset theory. What do you think, Terry?
I think they're all good and they all have good points. I think it depends on your audience, right? Because all family circumstances are different. So for example, for the teachers and the site coordinators, since they work with the kids every day, they see things that we wouldn't necessarily see. So maybe they would better know how to target and benefit the families the best based on their individual scenarios. I mean, I know when I worked at the school, I got to know parents, in a different way, and you see the kids, how they are with their parents versus how they are with just you, and how they open up. So I think that is key to determine the best way to help them.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're so lucky that we have Ari, who's a site coordinator, who's boots on the ground. So you have such, you know, invaluable insight, Ari, as to
Thank
what,
you.
yeah, as to what, you know, the needs of the kids and families that we serve. How are the kids, how are your kids doing?
Pretty good. We're open full time here. So we actually just started having our seventh graders sit in the lunchroom this week.
Wow.
They've been eating in their classrooms since the beginning of the year. So it's nice to see them be able to mingle. Of course, you know, there's still social distance within their classes, but one step closer to something else. So it's nice to see them open up as things do too, honestly.
That's so great. So happy to hear that. Man, we just need to get back to normality.
Yeah. So
Whatever.
in time though, yeah.
Well, it looks like we can go back into out of our breakout rooms. I'll see you girls in the main room.
See ya.
Okay, seems like we're all back. Wonderful. I always get nervous with this part. Okay, anyone would like to share which theory and which best practices you think would be great if your organization included that with your great core values within CIS? Anyone? Let me do it this way. Did anyone choose theory number 1, strength and perspective approach? Okay, Tisha, I see your hand. Yes.
Yes. You know, every single one of those best practices we were talking about that I have seen those impact students, whether it's from a former teacher that was a mentor to me, one of the site coordinators that I work with in communities and schools, and every single one of those strategies I've seen utilized, and I've just seen such great results. So it just really resonated with me.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because many people will say, oh, well, that's just research. It really doesn't work. But you have seen evidence of it. Wonderful. Did anyone choose number 2, where you felt that should be the main focus, which is the resilience theory? Anyone choose that one?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't share with my group, but I feel like we do all these pretty well. I would say myself that I could probably implement this one here at my site, just because I'm so caught up trying to get these students like being on grade level, and I'm just focusing so much on the academics that I'm not paying attention to making them shine at what they're good at or anything like that.
And you know what? I love what you said, because someone included in the chat, each one of these theories could be used in different situations and in different grade levels. And that is absolutely correct. What about the one, did anyone have any thoughts on family attribution theory? What are your thoughts about that? And the best practices were withhold judgment, attempt to find out the why behind if you see some behavior that's not real. I think Lexi, yes, go for it.
As a group, we kind of decided, like I put in the chat, that each one could be used differently. But I chose this one working with 5th and 6th graders, just because it's more of a relational thing first, meeting them where they're at first before you try to use the next theories of, you know, finding them resources and doing all this. First, you have to know where they come from, how they see the world, and why they're doing what they're doing, especially behaviorally.
Absolutely. And Lexi, we already said that when you look at typically, and I'm saying collectively as a group, when you look at students and families who are surviving in poverty, the 3 things that they value the most is survival, relationship, and they use entertainment as a way to really kind of relieve themselves. So if you see someone misbehaving, maybe, and we already know that they're more at a higher risk of those those ACEs, than typically others who are in a different type of socioeconomic. So if you see a behavior, especially with the discipline, always, I say to educators, go behind the why. Our kids just didn't come into school just to act up, Something is triggering that. Let's try to see if we can find out the why before we automatically label the student as a discipline problem. Now, in some cases, that is the truth, but in fewer, the majority is there's something triggering that emotion. So any other group before we close this part of the conversation out? Jennifer, did your group have anything?
Oh, yeah. Ari, did you want to talk about the asset theory?
Yeah, I don't mind talking.
And I called on you because I heard that when I popped in. Okay.
No, it's okay. So we decided on the asset theory. We all actually thought that it would worked really well with not only with the students, but with, the families, because we're all always connecting the students and their families with resources around town. Because in reality, the student can't figure out how to pay the bills. The student's worrying about mom being able to pay the bills. And so, we let them know it's okay, that there's these resources available to them around town. So, and it gives them the opportunity to do it themselves. So I thought that was really cool.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing. Thanks. Because I thought that was a great point when I jumped in your room. So we're going to close this part of the conversation out on working with students of poverty, what we can do to give them hope. And the way I would like to close it out is if you would put in the Zoom chat one thing that we've discussed today that really resonated with you. And then I'm going to try to squeeze in something the last 10 minutes of our conversation that I would love for you to keep at the forefront as you're working with your colleagues in the school setting. So if you don't mind putting in the Zoom chat, one thing that really resonated with you as we engaged in our conversation today. And as you continue to include in the Zoom chat, I have on the screen something that is known as micro messages. And micro messages, especially microaggression, and I'm going to tell you the difference. We've heard a lot lately, especially since March of 2020, about micro messages and microaggression. So I just wanted to do a quick little activity with you to tell you where the terms came from, who coined the term, and what they actually mean. So let's do a quick matching of. We're going to look at the statements over here in column A. If you heard someone say, because this actually is a micro message, it's a negative micro message, and our negative micro messages are called micro inequity. That means that you're saying something negative or your gesture is negative that's making someone feel excluded. And we know all about diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We're trying our best to make people feel included. So if you heard someone make this statement, that's retarded, what could the possible interpretation be? From over here, if we heard someone make the statement, that's retarded, what could the possible interpretation be?
The top one.
Yep, people with disabilities are less important. Say if we heard someone, because this really is a microaggressive statement, and I'm going to give you the meaning of microaggression. I hear teachers say this all the time, I don't see color. What could the possible interpretation be?
Definitely your experiences are invalid.
Invalid. You know, you see that I'm an African-American female, you suppose you're visible, but just don't let that what you see put me in a negative zone right away. You have a negative perspective about me right away until you really get to know me. And that is what we call a microaggressive statement. So let's do one more, and then I'm going to get into the difference. What does microaggression mean? What does that mean? Let's look at one more. If you heard someone make the statement, should you be eating that to a larger woman? What could the possible interpretation be?
You have no self-control.
You have no self-control. Now that's a micro inequity. It's a negative statement. Now let me show you an example of one more microaggression, and then we're going to talk about the difference between micro inequities, which is a negative message, and the microaggression, which is also a negative message, but it's the most severe negative message. It's almost like you're not Black. What could the possible interpretation be?
You don't fit the stereotypes of your group.
And that's a microaggression. So let me quickly share with you what we mean by microaggression, because the term was actually coined by two gentlemen way back in the early 70s. So this term isn't anything new. It just started to resurface. And I think it resurfaced during the George Floyd incident. I could be wrong about that, but it isn't a new statement. This term, microaggression, was coined by Dr. Wing Sue, as well as Dr. Chester Pierce. And they started doing this work way back in the 70s. And then all of a sudden the terms went away, but then they start resurfacing again. So here's what we mean by microaggression. Microaggressions are daily terms that some individuals hear, or they even feel it. And it's usually targeted against you because of your racial or ethnic identity, or you're in a vulnerable community, or you're in a marginalized group membership. There's a lot of micro messages occurring against our LGBT individuals. So micro messages show up and micro messages is strictly because of your racial identity, your ethnic identity, or some dimension of diversity, your sexual orientation, your perceived gender identity. That's the difference, where micro messages, micro inequities, are simply negative, rude messages. Microaggressions are messages that's done because of a racial identity or some dimension of diversity that you recognize. And they show up in these 4 forms. It could be an insult, an assault, and a micro assault is just plain old racism terminology. Say if I got angry at Jennifer and I say, oh, Jennifer, you shut up, you old, and called her out of her name based on her racial or her heritage. That's just old-fashioned racism. And then micro invalidation, and most of these two are unconscious. People don't even know that they have insulted you when they insult you. And micro invalidation often is unconscious. People don't realize that they're really invalidating you when they say, they're not validating you, especially when they say, I don't see color. That's a micro invalidation. So that's the difference between micro inequities and microaggressions. Microaggressions are statements and gestures that's made simply because of your race, ethnicity, or some dimension of diversity, some identity. So the micro assault, you're at a ceremony and a person keeps walking by a Muslim family calling them terrorists. That's an assault. You are doing that on purpose. So micro assaults are conscious. It's like direct comments or intended acts. You're doing it on purpose. You know that you're doing it when you do a micro assault. But when you do micro insult, this is unconscious. You don't even realize that you've done it. So at this elderly home, the elderly lady feels that she's being picked on or yelled at because she's old. But actually the young lady is upset with her because someone hasn't paid her bill. But the way the elderly lady is interpreting it is because I'm older and this young lady is making me feel demeaned or minimizing my existence. And then here's another example of a micro insult, usually unconscious. All you had to do is say you're pretty, but when you add for a Black girl, then it becomes an insult. Because you might be given it might be interpreted that most Black girls are not pretty. And then an example of a micro invalidation. When someone shares with you their experience, if I say, oh, every time I go to the store, someone is following me as if they think I'm going to steal. And then if you say, oh, Greta, you're just being oversensitive. They do that to me too. you're invalidating my experience. I'm trying to share with you what my experience is. So you did receive a document from Jennifer. Jennifer, I think, did I send you that document, examples of microaggressions in the classroom? I'm going to bring it up so that we can look at this very carefully. Now, I need to say this. I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm working with a school now where this occurs a lot. It's in Clark, where there are all kinds of microaggressive statements made from the adults to the students and their family. And that's why I'm in the school trying to help them to navigate. But when you look at some of these statements, and if I didn't send it to you, Jennifer, I will when I send the PowerPoint. I just wanted you to be aware that these were microaggressive statements that students reported to Dr. Sue Wing, who's still doing research around this because the term has resurfaced. And I didn't want anyone to think it's a new term. It's been around for a while, but I think because of our social climate, we're hearing more about it. So these are some of the statements, microaggressive statements that students have reported that make them feel either invalidated, or it's an insult, or it's an assault. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that you're going to hear a lot. And I think especially when all schools get back face to face, 100%, we may begin to see and hear a lot of that, and just wanted you to be aware of what some of those statements could sound like and look like. And it's unfortunate that I have to report today that I am working with a school where these statements occur with adults to students, and then the adults to adults is happening. So I do see a hand. I don't know, Leslie, if your hand was raised. Oh, okay. All right, Jennifer, on that note, I think it would be safe. And then maybe in the future, sometime we can go into more detail about micro messages, the micro inequities and the micro messages, and also micro affirmations, which is the positive, where we would like to stay as much as we possibly can. So I'd like to turn it back over to you, Jennifer. It's been a blast, CIS, and I'm going to put something in my, this is how I feel about your organization. I love the organization, and it has been great working with you this past year in COVID and out of COVID.
Well, thank you so much, Greta. We are just so grateful that you have assisted us with these trainings. They've been so phenomenal, and you are so passionate. It screams through the screen. I love it. We can feel the passion that you have, and we're just so super grateful.
Thank you. And Jennifer, I'll send you and Karen a QR code so they can provide feedback. And then in a separate email, I'll make sure you get the PowerPoint because I want them to have it and all of the resources. Okay?
Absolutely, Greta. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one. Be safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Bye, Tammy.
Bye,
nice
everyone.
To see everyone.
Good night.